Right, let me set the scene. You're minding your own business on a cold winter's night. You're just chilling, listening to the radio or the TV. You're having a lovely time when all of a sudden, this plays. Or this.
They want the major population centers wiped out.
Or maybe this.
Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves.
Pretty terrifying, right? Well, believe it or not, this actually happened to people. There's people out there right now that this happened to, and they're just going about their day-to-day lives. I don't think I'd sleep again. Anyway, in today's video, we're going to take a look at some of the spookiest broadcasts in TV and radio history. Some of these were intentional, some of these were hijackings, some of them have never been explained. So settle in and let's get spooky. Before we get started, in today's video, we'll be talking about some super spooky radio incidents. And they might get you in the mood to create something spooky yourself. So let me tell you about radio.co, an online platform that lets you create your very own radio station. With Halloween fast approaching, why not create a radio station that could scare the heck out of anyone, from your friends, customers, or even just trick-or-treaters at your front door? Find out more by heading to radio.co and starting a 7-day free trial today. Number 5. Martian invasion. At 8 PM on October 30th, 1930, Americans across the country were settling down to listen to the radio. On the CBS radio network, the 17th episode of The Mercury Theatre on air was about to play. Now, the show itself was essentially hour-long dramas created by someone you might have heard of, Orson Welles. However, this episode was going to be a bit different from the 16 that came before. To an unknowing viewer tuning in, it sounded like a regular news broadcast, starting with a discussion with scientists about recent earthquakes detected on Mars.
A slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is reported over Nova Scotia, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over the northeastern states.
But things began to get a bit more sinister when the reporters arrived at the scene of a large cylinder which had recently crashed down to Earth.
It strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames.
Piano interlude begins to play as the broadcast breaks down entirely, and when it returns, an emergency broadcast describes the scenes of destruction in New York City and across America as aliens invade. Now, you might have guessed by now, but this didn't actually happen. America wasn't destroyed in the 1930s by aliens. This was a performance of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. But if you were tuning in before the start of the show, you might have believed this was actually happening. Remember, this was a time when radio was in its very early days and people just kind of believed anything they heard on it, especially when it sounded like a news broadcast. They weren't as well equipped for fake news like we are these days. Reports of mass panic started coming into the station, and the next day the media were talking about chaos in the streets that was stirred up by this one radio show. There was so much panic, in fact, that while the show was still going out, police stormed the station and told them to shut it down. To make matters worse, a power outage occurred at the same time, so people listening in Washington had their radio suddenly turn off, and they tried to call people, and that was dead too. So obviously that led them to believe, oh my god, this is actually happening. Because of all this, at the first break, the announcer Dan Seymour was forced to remind viewers that this is all a drama and not actually real. The second part of the show was a more conventional drama anyway, but still, by this point, panic had already begun.
We did all of that very carefully and exactly reproduced, as I say, what would have happened, thinking to make the whole thing more effective, but we had no idea how effective it would be. We saw that in the control room, there were a great many policemen, and every moment more. I had no idea that I'd suddenly become a sort of national event.
At the last minute as well, Wells was reported to have added a closing statement to the show to reassure viewers that CBS hadn't actually been destroyed and that the show was merely a Halloween special. The reports of mass panic in the streets and the media are widely disputed, but calls to the police and the media definitely did go into overdrive that night. So much so that when the cast left the studio, once the show had finished, that there were groups of people outside the front door, so they actually had to go out the back. While we can kind of look back on this event now as a bit of fun, at the time it was actually treated very seriously. Wells said in an interview he hoped the events would make people wary of believing everything they heard on the radio, and obviously that was true, but this kind of backfired as well. A few years later, during World War II, the events of Pearl Harbor unfolded and were announced on the radio, and because of what happened with the War of the Worlds incident, a lot of people didn't actually believe it. Number 4, zombie apocalypse warning. On February 11, 2013, a warning about an impending apocalypse was displayed on various different TV stations. First happened at 2:30 p.m. during the Steve Wilkos show. A message was broadcast over the episode about reports of the dead rising up and attacking the living. Oh no! Now, the message actually sounded fairly authentic, and due to its use of the emergency broadcast tones you may have heard before, people believed it.
Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living. Follow the messages on screen that will be updated as information becomes available.
Now, obviously, the broadcast was a hoax from local hijackers. The world, again, didn't end in 2013. But this didn't stop the FCC, who's in charge of TV and radio broadcasts, from banning the use of the emergency tones when they're not actually being used for emergency purposes. Any broadcaster using the EAS or WEA tones outside of a real broadcast could actually see a fine or a sanction. To avoid any such use of the emergency system being exploited again, an investigation was launched, and they found various different vulnerabilities in the system which have since been fixed. So hopefully there won't be any emergency announcements that aren't actually legit going forward. Number 3, Area 51 caller. On September 11th, 1997, Art Bell received a very unusual caller on his radio show.
I don't have a whole lot of time. They're gonna they'll triangulate on this position really soon.
The show in question was discussing the long-term conspiracy theories around Area 51 and the possibility that it's involved in aliens in some way. These theories date back decades and were nothing new or exciting even in the 90s. However, the caller in question claimed to be an ex-Area 51 employee, and their manner and frantic approach raised a fair few eyebrows from listeners. The caller claims to not have a lot of time, and it sounds like they're running or moving. They claim to be on the run after being let go by Area 51, and suggest they'll discover his location soon.
They're extra-dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with.
Then he starts going on a tangent about what Area 51 actually knows about aliens, but before he can really get into it, something unusual happens. And before we go into any more, I know what you're probably thinking. This kind of guy is a dime a dozen. You might have passed someone on the street ranting about the same thing just the other day.
Washington, D.C. will have its lights go out!
That guy's crazy, right, Daddy?
I don't think so.
But bear with me, because here's the thing. While the gentleman in question is mid-sentence, the whole radio station goes dead, completely off air, and for a fair bit of time too.
I started getting...
Now, if you know anything about radio, you'll know that this is extremely uncommon, because in most countries in the world, if you go off air for even a minute, you're probably going to find yourself with a fine from the licensing body like the FCC or Ofcom. So why did this happen? Because the station probably wouldn't have wanted this. Was it just a coincidence like the power cut during War of the Worlds? Or was there something more sinister going on here? Well, obviously a lot of people jumped to the conclusion that this was the government switching off the radio station because they didn't want people to hear what he was about to say. And when the station came back up online, the caller in question was nowhere to be found. The hosts themselves even seemed very confused about what the hell just happened. A year later, the same show received a call claiming to be from the original caller, saying that it was all a hoax. But the caller sounds very different. But overall, I don't think we're ever going to find out what happened during this radio show. Number 2. Radio number stations. Now, this isn't a one-off incident like the others. Instead, it's more of a compilation of creepy radio stations. The first of these stations is titled Swedish Rhapsody and features a terrifying tune being played on repeat. It only stops occasionally when you hear the voice of a little girl, seemingly, speaking in German, saying a variety of different numbers. Another, the Lincolnshire Poacher, broadcast from Cyprus. Only occasionally would it become active, playing a cheerful tune followed by a British woman's voice. And finally, the buzzer, broadcasting from St. Petersburg in Russia, plays a chilling buzzing sound on repeat. Only occasionally do human voices ever come onto this station. Although occasionally, Russian voices have been heard chattering in the background, revealing that the station isn't actually automated, but manned 24/7. are these mysterious transmissions? Are they ghosts trying to talk to us through the radio waves? Well, no, but it's still quite interesting. They're number stations, which are shortwave transmissions that are commonly believed to be methods of communication between spies and intelligence officers. Bloody James Bond! Talking to you through nursery rhymes and creepy girls' voices. Most known stations use speech synthesis to announce numbers, though it's not unusual to encounter digital modes like phase shift keying, frequency shift keying, or even Morse code. While many of the stations follow strict schedules that come online at certain times, others just appear randomly. So while they might not be as sinister as they sound, the element of mystery surrounding them has fascinated people since World War I. The fact that some, like the buzzer, are still transmitting to this day as well could suggest they are more important than we might think. In 2006, a North Korean station, the Voice of Korea, even interrupted the British Lincolnshire Poacher station in Cyprus. People don't know why, but this could be that they were transmitting stuff that North Korea didn't really want them to. Number 1, the Max Headroom incident. Now this one is genuinely creepy. I remember seeing this for the first time and being totally freaked out for a while. And just a warning, this one gets really weird. Like, there's no way you'll expect it to go where it goes. On November 22nd, 1987, 2 television stations in Chicago were hijacked by an individual wearing a creepy mask and swaying erratically in front of a spiraling metal background. The character being imitated was Max Headroom, which is a TV character from a futuristic television series from the same time. Max is already a pretty creepy presence on screen in itself, but this hijacking took things to a whole new level. The first intrusion happened on an independent TV station called WGN TV at around about 9 o'clock. The individual appeared on screen and began moving quite weirdly, but there was no sound. Instead, there was just sort of a loud buzzing noise.
Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I.
It only lasted for about 17 seconds too, but people were pretty creeped out by it. Understandably. However, 2 hours later, things got even weirder. On PBS at about 11 o'clock at night, during a broadcast of Doctor Who of all things, the hijacker returned, and this time there was even sound. At first, it was seemingly nonsense coming out of Max's weird mask, but in one section he even complained about the extreme pain he was feeling from his hemorrhoids. And to make things worse, the station didn't have any engineers at hand, so it went on for a lot longer than the original one, and things were about to get a lot weirder. I told you it was weird. What the hell's going on? After about 90 seconds, the broadcast ended and normal service resumed. Well, that was a weird episode of Doctor Who. Days after the broadcast, the FCC investigated the incident in an attempt to find those responsible. However, the culprits have never been found to this day. The FCC claims the hijackers must have had pretty expensive equipment and a knowledge of transmissions, as well as being in the nearby vicinity of the television station to pull off the stunt. But don't worry, this isn't likely to happen again because America and most of the world has now switched from analog TV to digital. But it's fair to say that this creepy incident will go down in history as one of the weirdest things to ever air on TV. So that's it for today. What did you think of our list? As always, let us know down in the comments some of your creepy transmissions you might know about. And that's it for me. I'm probably going to go watch an episode of something chill to relax now. I was planning to watch Doctor Who, but no, not tonight.